information road that will take you there. Be informed and stay in tune. Uplift your soul and heal your wounds. Welcome to Bashment, baby. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Bashment Bay TV. I'm your host, Sharon Cummings.
And I'm Chris Gilchrist.
And I'm Paulette Samuels. In 2001, of all non-fatal violence directed against women, 20% was found to be of domestic physical violence. And in men, this number was found to be 3%. That's a very wide gap. Chris, do you want to elaborate?
Nearly 5.3 million incidents of domestic violence occur annually among U.S. women aged 18 or older, with 3.2 million occurring in men. Battered women average 6.9 million physical assaults by the same partner in a year, whereas battered men average 4.4 million assaults by the same partner in a year. So as you see, this is not just a woman versus man issue. Men are abused as well.
Our discussion today will be on domestic abuse and the cause and effect. So we'll be right back.
Estella's legacy. Grandma Estella, I have a question. Written by Sharon Cummings, Tamika Jones, and Charmaine Russell.
Welcome back. What exactly is domestic violence? You might think you know what it is. It's not just about hitting someone or punching someone or slapping someone. It's way more than that. Besides the mental and the verbal abuse, there are 6 forms of abuse. I know some of you or someone you know might need this information. And I'm sure it will help in some way because there's a lot of individuals that are going through domestic violence, females and males. It's not just a female thing. And, you know, we need to understand that domestic violence, it's just getting out of hand. And especially since COVID, the numbers have gone up. A friend to watch. If you feel that they need some information, they will certainly get it on this episode. It's not biased.
Our guest tonight is Miss Enid Ocasio, who is a domestic violence community advocate. Miss Enid, welcome. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So I have to kick things off being the only man on the panel, right? These statistics are staggering. It's bad enough that they exist to begin with, but it's mind-blowing to me that so many men are actually affected by domestic abuse. And, you know, of course, with statistics as usual, we only talk about what it is that has been reported and what we can document. So you can just imagine how many more men are in danger of, you know, their egos are at play, you know, their masculinity is at play, and so not to record these things or report these things. How prevalent is this in your field of work as we look at these statistics as it pertains to men in particular?
Yes, it's very prevalent. They, and as you indicated, because they don't report. And many of times, yeah, that the concept or the thinking is that it is, you know, the pride, the ego, the machismo, but it all turns out to just be fear. It's fear, fear of not being believed and fear of being made fun of. And when I go out and I speak to many of individuals, and I always ask if there is, especially when there are gentlemen in the room, I'll always ask, you know, what would prevent you from giving out information of what's happened to you, of what you've endured, of what you have sustained. And most times it's that fear. And, and when you know that you're not going to be believed, or when it's going down that path, what do men tend to just put the block up. And you know what? I'm not saying anything else, or they don't even go any further from that. So, yeah.
So do you find that on the receiving end of the complaints, or on the receiving end of the reports, do you find that your colleagues or those authorities who are on the receiving end of these reports, do you find that some of them struggle to believe that a man is being abused as well?
Yes, they do.
Wow.
I've actually had individuals call for assistance and were not even paid attention to.
Wow.
So of course, after the fact, I'm trying to now remedy the situation, and and build the confidence again to even want to speak, to want to say something, which is kind of hard because of the experience already I had.
Wow. I'm going to ask you, so I had to get that off my chest real quick because it was just such a glaring statistic that we had to touch on. But, I want you to talk about the different types of abuse that that you're encountering, because abuse is not always physical, right? And even the non-physical abuse have some very damning effects and impact regardless of the type. So just talk to us about some of the types of abuse, most prevalent types that you come across.
Sure. So because you did indicate that the physical, I am going to start with the physical, because the physical most would recognize as the punching, slapping, kicking, pushing, shoving. Many of times people don't consider the spitting as part of a physical. They will also consider the withholding of medication. So I always indicate, if overdosing, underdosing, or not dosing, you're causing someone's physicality. Wow. And again, those things are not really considered as being physical abuse. And it is, because it causes some sort of physicality. So just to give a quick example, if somebody has asthma and you're not allowing them access to their asthma pump, you're going to cause a physical, that's causing physical abuse to that individual. Same thing. We'll see it a lot.
Isn't it?
Yes. We'll see it a lot in the elder abuse and child abuse, right? Wow. Because most times they don't know how much of medication to administer to themselves. So they're reliant on someone administering to them. But these are all part. And not only that, but, telling somebody they're too fat. Now, when you're constantly telling somebody they're too fat, what does the individual then do? That's when it opens the doors for all the other disorders, the eating disorders, right? The bulimic, the binging, and things of that nature, which physical abuse. So I just needed to mention that, because again, sometimes people don't recognize all of the other aspects of physical abuse. It's just not the smacking, kicking, punching, shoving. There are other elements to it as well. And then we also have the financial, right? The financial, not allowing the person to either make their own money, or if they do make their own money, they do have to hand it over. I also, I have had many of clients who perhaps have jobs and wanted to get an increase or perhaps promotions. And so they perhaps needed to go back to school for extra credits or get a certificate program, and the offender wasn't allowing that to happen. And this could be on both sides, male or female. The female not allowing the male to do it, or the male not allowing the female to do it. So again, that's another form of abuse. We usually hone it down to 6 of them, because a lot of them have other things intertwined with it. So the sexual abuse is also one of the prevalent ones, the coercing someone to have sex. In the marriage, a lot of times people don't consider a force of sex from your partner to be an abuse, right? Because that's my husband or that's my wife. But it is, right? So therefore, and laws changed after 1998. So therefore, sexual abuse, coercion of it is another form. And then the other 2, there's 2 more after that, which actually is 3, but they sort of intertwine. So we have emotional, psychological, and we have the digital, right? So it all begins with the emotional. Again, not anything that is like in the penal law to report. who's going to report that you yelled at me and it made me feel some type of way? There's no offense for that, but it's still an emotional abuse. And they sort of hone in on it because they know your feelings. They know what you know, how you would treat them and things of that nature. So emotional abuse is the form that they're speaking to you, the form that they're acting towards you. And so therefore it's making you feel, you know, your emotions are stirred up. That leads into your psychological, because now you start to believe everything that that individual is saying. So if the individual is calling you out of your name, if they're saying that you're, you know, not worthy of anything, that no one's ever going to love you. The best one is no one's ever going to love you like me, which I always say, well, that's what I'm looking for, right? I'm looking for someone to not love me like you.
Yes.
But again, you know, that's something that they think that's going to really make an impact. And it does. To many of women and many of men, it does make an impact. That the person who you love is telling you that they don't love you.
Mhm.
So that does something to someone. The digital part of it is when it's not being spoken. I always say when the mouth is not flapping, the body is always speaking, is always saying something. So therefore, if you're making movements, you know, like the crossing of the eyes, the pointing and making a fist in your hand and things of that nature. So now how is that physical? I mean, I'm sorry, how is that digital? We have all these emojis now that do that, right? So you're sending emojis of, you know, somebody getting beat up. Or there was one where someone didn't really, they took it very light, but I was like, I said, look at that again. I don't know if you ever saw the Elmer Fudd and Bugs Bunny, where they're out in, and he says, how many lumps do you want? You know, they're having coffee, but he goes, how many lumps do you want? He's talking about the sugar, but then again, he's hitting him over the head with, you know, again, it's an implication of physical abuse. A lot of people didn't pick that up and they were like, are you kidding me? I'm like, no. Again, we have to look at what the intent of the individual is. Is it just to send a cartoon, or is that a message in the cartoon that is being sent? Right? So there you have it's 6 forms of abuse. So you had your physical, your financial, your sexual, and then the other 3 are intertwined. Because when you're sending these things through text, when you're sending it through email, or however it is that you're sending messages or emojis and things, it's causing the emotional abuse, which then triggers the psychological.
Wow.
Most physical abuse in it usually start out with demeaning and controlling behavior. And there's one particular phrase I've heard, and I think this is sort of like to, how would you say, to sort of like cover up the abuse. They will turn around and they'll say, oh, he's just a narcissist. That's his way. And they don't understand that narcissism is a form of control and a form of abuse. They just don't see that. So they use that phrase to sort of like, you know, put it in a much lighter way, or saying, okay, that's how he is and that's his behavior, but he's not abusive. You know, so, you know, if your partner is constantly belittling you, causing you to feel guilty for their aggression and making you believe that you don't deserve better, then they sort of like put this in there, like, I'm a narcissist, so I can't help myself. You know, are these signs more likely to lead to physical violence from a narcissist's point of view?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because when the words are no longer triggering, then they go to the physicality. And many of times it's not directly. So what do I mean by that? That it may be a punch in the wall, but you're standing right next to it. It could be a throwing of an object in your direction, not necessarily hitting you, but it's just the indication of I could have got you, you know? So again, it increases. And that's why I hone into the phrase, don't get in the habit of collecting red flags. The minute you start to feel something is not right, that's when you want to have the conversation. And if they're not receiving what you're stating, what you're saying, and how you're feeling, then that's not the person for you. Right? There's 2 other elements that I always tell individuals is, if the person is not bringing you peace, and if they're not helping you grow, then maybe that's not the person.
Wow. Enid, you mentioned the red flags just now, and I want to jump on that for a second because, you know, typically I mean, yeah, you'll find cases where somebody just completely loses their mind, but it doesn't usually flow like that overnight, right?
Right.
There's really a gradual lead up to this type of, behavior. What is it that you're finding that individuals aren't paying attention to? You know, I often hear, "Oh well, it was just one slap,"
Mhm.
or,
Mhm.
Yeah.
oh well, it was just this one time, and they were really mad, and yes, I was mouthing off a lot, and I understand why. And then you say, and it happens again, right? And
Mhm.
sometimes it happens, it becomes too late.
Again and
Yes.
again and again. Right.
Mhm.
Yes, I hear it again from speaking with many of individuals. I hear it all the time. I saw it, I ignored it. I really wanted to be with that person. Well, that's who I really had my eye on for years, and that was my opportunity, and I wasn't going to miss out on it.
Mhm.
These are the feedback. So I always hear that comment, right? I saw it, but I dismissed it. I saw it. I thought I can change it,
Mhm.
right? Um, it wasn't as bad in the beginning as it is now.
Wow.
Yeah, and that means a lot, right? Because
Yeah.
that means there was a beginning.
Right.
So you didn't catch it when it was an inch, and now you're trying to stop it when it's a yard.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Yes.
And that's where it becomes more difficult. That's why I always indicate that it's much more difficult to deal with a victim who has more of the emotional and psychological abuse
Mhm.
than the physical,
Mhm.
because the physical is dismissed, right? The bruise goes away, it heals, but that emotional and the psychological is distorting because, again, every time they hear those words. So this is another phrase that I hear a lot as well, which is, I always say it's deep, right? I would have preferred them kick me, slap me, punch me than to say what they said,
Mm.
Wow.
Mm.
right?
And
So, and when I say that to people, I'm like, did you hear that? Like, you would prefer the physicalness than not the emotional, because the emotional is it's a big impact on an individual.
I
And
actually speak to that, from the perspective of a child, growing up in Jamaica, of course, you get a beating, no problem. Listen, I can tell you, I can only think of one beating that I got that I did not deserve. Okay? Listen, I was as bad as they come, okay? Um,
well,
and
that wasn't abuse.
I
That
don't feel
was
as though
training you, teaching you
That
to
was
be
corrective
who you
action.
Yes,
are.
corrective
I don't
action.
I don't feel as though I was an abused child. I can't tell you that, right? But I will tell you this. My dad said something to me one day, and I would have repeated, I have said those exact words. I would have preferred for him to punch me square in my face, okay, than to have said what he did, because it has not left me.
Mhm.
Right,
And I
right.
guess,
Has an impact. Yeah,
It scars you.
yeah.
when reality, I'm not saying it's better now. I'm just saying in my mind, this is why I'm thinking I would say that, because when there's physicality, your body is in that fight or flight mode, right?
Oh.
Your
Mm-hmm.
body is sending all kind of messages to you where it is protecting you and you're ready to go. When that emotional piece hits though,
Mhm.
when that seed gets planted, yeah, yeah.
Get triggers. Every time you hear those words, it triggers something.
Oh yeah.
Right, right.
Enid, let me ask you, what are some of the causes which leads to physical abuse in a relationship? And are there long-lasting effects?
Right. So, what are the causes? Anything can be a cause. It doesn't take much for the person who's actually committing the offenses
Wow.
to be provoked, to say the word, right? They just want things their way, when they want it, how they want it, when they say they want it. And if there is an inkling of resistance to it, is when they go right into their power and control mode, as I call it. And And that's why we have this thing called the power and control. I'm sorry, the tension builder, right? There's a tension builder, and then you have the physical, and then you have what they call the reconciliation stage. Well, they actually call it the honeymoon stage. I don't like to call it the honeymoon stage because the person, when you think of honeymoon or when you hear honeymoon, you think like the background that you're in right now, right? It's like you think of beautiful things, everlasting, sunrise, sunset, a drink in your hand, you're throwing yourself back. That's not how the victim is feeling. So I would call it more the reconciliation stage, where they're trying to reconcile what it is that happened and how to prevent for it to happen again. So they have this little window that it's where they're walking on eggshells because they don't know what's going to cause that tension phase again.
Next flare up.
Right, exactly. And then it's called the cycle of violence. That's what we call a cycle of violence, where many of times people go, well, if you know that that's how they are, why do you not leave? Why do you stay? Why do you take it? This is where then I mean, just today I had this conversation with someone else. They were like, well, if it would have been me, I said, you see, this is the problem. It's not you.
Yeah.
It's another individual. Right? We each will deal with what we can deal because we all have different tolerance levels.
Yeah.
Right? Some people have more than others. And so therefore, because this person, and again, we have to really consider this love factor. Love factor is real. If there's children, that's another reason as to why somebody. So this is the other reason why as to I was asked, what is the need? What are you in need of? Because we need to supply the need. And once we get the needs supplied, that person then can become independent and move forward.
Yeah.
Wow.
But when you're in an abusive relationship, it has a detrimental effect on the children.
Yes, it sure does. So we were just having this conversation, my partner and I, last week, where we were saying how, we have mental health awareness this month. May is mental health awareness. And what we're seeing with the statistics is a lot of the children that sustained. So, Chris, there's a lot of stuff that you sustained when you were younger that is affecting you this day and age. And many of times we don't realize why we react to things the way we react to them, or why we're so sensitive to some things and things of that nature. But then when we go, and this is why I always encourage therapy, right? Some counseling services, because they're going to hone in to a lot of the things that happened in the past. And truthfully, I mean, it hasn't been documented. I haven't seen any statistics, but I think that a lot of the things that many individuals are dealing with now, the mental health concerns this day and age, today, 2020, is because of things that they've endured back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s when they were younger and never got tended to, right? Because there wasn't much counseling or therapy being had. At least I don't recall it as much as it is now, right? So because, and this I only gathered, and this is how we got to the conversation. I'm working with a client, and when she came out of her session, she said, I was like, how did everything go? And she said, everything went well. They're looking to have me be seen long-term. And I was like, oh, why is that? Oh, because of my childhood. So I was like, okay. And then that's how the conversation began, where, there's a lot of issues that people are exerting now, things that they're enduring now, or that they're showing now, but it's all from, it stems from what they saw. So this is another reason as to why I always tell people, you gotta be careful how you act and what you do in front of the children.
Yeah, very important.
It's impactful, yes. I don't know if last October, there was a movie on Netflix called Maids.
Maid, I saw it.
You saw it? Okay. So what was the big problem there? Did she disclose, or I'm sorry, did she identify as being a victim of domestic violence? She did not. She didn't identify.
She didn't.
And she didn't identify because it wasn't physical,
Right.
but it had all the other elements to it.
It's emotional, totally emotional.
All
My
emotional
gosh.
and right. And the whole coercion and
Mhm.
things. But the other aspect of that is her mom.
Her mom.
Her
Her
mom was a
mom.
victim herself.
Yes.
So it only indicated how, and remember, she kept having flashbacks and she thought it was her daughter, but it was her.
It's her mom. It was her.
It was her. So she was having flashbacks, but it was circumstances that she endured. And that's how then she figured, oh, wait a minute, my dad was abusive to my dad. I mean, my dad was abusive to my mom. And that's what I saw. And so then that's when she said, I don't want this to happen to my daughter.
To my
But it had
daughter.
already happened, right?
Yes.
It had already happened because her daughter did. So again, yes, children get impacted. And that's why it's, you know, again, the screaming, the hitting in front of them,
Mhm.
because they pick it up. I have another client of mine that actually tells me, my son speaks to me as my husband does. Right. So I'm like, well, describe that to me. And she goes, well, he'll stand at the door and say, hurry up. What are you waiting for? Why are you taking so long? And I'm like, okay, because of course they are sponges. They don't know that that's not the way to speak to a mom, a woman, a lady. You know, that's what they hear.
I'm kind of glad that I grew up in the you know, do as I say, not as I do.
Right.
Because I really do think it saved me.
Yeah.
Because I probably would not be here, you know, if my dad's small. Let me think that there's any one day that it was okay for me to try to repeat or try any of that. Oh no,
Yeah.
how about lost some teeth or something?
Yes, yes.
You mentioned earlier, and I want to go back to this real quick before we move on. You mentioned earlier that the types of abuse and the fact, you know, yes, we kind of hone in on physical abuse. And you just mentioned the needs. When you're dealing with your client, you talk about what it is that you need, because if we address your need, then we can probably empower you to remove yourself from a space, right?
Mhm.
How many of your cases are work related when it comes to that type of verbal emotional abuse, and it's connected to, well, I need this job?
There's a lot. It's a lot. And actually they'll use the job to get away from, you know,
From
they
the
actually want,
from the
what was that?
situation. Yep.
Right. They want to go to work.
Yeah.
They'd rather be at work
I
than
know.
to be at home.
It's so funny because I'll go back to what Chris talked about the men, and I can tell you at my jobs that I've been at, whenever the guys or the bosses or whoever they are come in, and they are always like this on your case, get this done, they're mean and they're carrying on, then the wife call and they're like, hello, you know, like, oh yes, I'll be there shortly. Yeah, what time do you want me to come home? And you can hear them, and I'm like, okay, so we know who is the boss at home, and that could probably be,
Why?
you know,
Why?
being
That's all that
abusive,
exertion,
emotional.
right?
Yeah.
So they exert their power at work
At
because they
work, but
can't
they
do it at
can't do
home.
it at home. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I've seen it so many times.
Yes,
Wow. Wow.
I agree. I totally agree.
Wow.
And-
It's impossible for individuals that have an abusive or is in an abusive relationship to leave well, it's not impossible, but how difficult is it that you find in reality in dealing with your clients? How difficult is it for people to leave the abusive relationship?
It's very difficult,
Mhm.
especially because, like I said, that love factor is real.
Hmm.
Right? They really do care for the person. They really want the best for the individual. Sometimes they're in that guilt and denial stage. And I've seen different stages. I've seen the young, I've seen the middle age, I've seen the old, trying to leave a circumstance. I must say this as well, that it is most dangerous for an individual when they are in the process of leaving.
Yeah.
And this is why it is very important to never say what your next move
Move
is.
is.
And you never say it to anyone. Now, I will say this, and I use movies just so that people can get an idea of what I refer to, what I'm referring to, which is the movie Enough with Jennifer Lopez.
Yes.
That okay. She had one best friend who she can count on, that she knew she would never say anything to anyone. And she knew that when she got that call and there was a code word, and that code word was stating that friend was getting in the car with a packed bag straight to where she was. Right? Now, if you have such a friend, a lot of us don't. But if you do have such a friend, then that's who you want to confide in. And if you don't, then you go to the grave with your information.
Right.
Right? You don't tell anyone, because what happens is the offender is going to go to everyone that they knew that knows you. And they're going to give them the whole saga. I really want to get back to, I'm a changed person. We got to work this out because of the kids, because I really do love her, because we made a vow. I mean, they do the whole thing where now, you know, like if, let's say if it was me, I mean, I'll give you an example. If you and I were going together and you left, and I'm trying to find out from Paulette, like, where is Chris? What is he doing? I really love him. We can work this out. I know. And I'm going to keep nipping at her until she's going to end up just giving in, because she's tired of me calling her, coming up and showing up wherever she's at and things. They give in. So that's why I say never say anything. Just make the move.
Yeah.
Do it quietly. And this is where a lot of times, even with myself, when I tell people, you know, you can disclose things to me, I'm not going to say anything, but I will put the right people in your path so that then we can make that transition.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be that you even meet the individuals, right? So this is where even like the store owners. So I give you an example. I had a young lady who I always said, you know, if you have an emergency, the store owner in the corner, when you go in there and you say you want a ham and cheese with extra ketchup, they know that means call 911.
Yeah, wow.
And that's why I say, you know, let's bring back it takes a village to keep us safe, right? Let's bring that back. If we bring that back, we could save a whole lot of lives.
Yeah.
A whole lot of lives.
Yeah.
I had another circumstance where, you know, in collaboration with a fitness gym, where we kept the person's belongings in a gym. And we just said, when you're ready, just go pick up your bag and go. You know, and occasionally we would go check. Is the bag still there? If the bag's still there, the person's still there. We'd go again until then ultimately we went, the bag wasn't there. 3 months later, the individual called and said, I'm in another state. I'm out, you know, I'm safe, I'm happy, I'm better off, da, da, da. So again, it takes collaboration with business owners, with churches, with clergy, with doctors' offices. You know, we just need to have that collaboration so that we can all assist an individual to be able to get out of their circumstance.
But do you find that a lot of females, they keep the abuse to themselves?
Oh, yes,
a
absolutely.
lot of times.
Oh, yes. I mean, and again, I disclose because I was a victim myself. People didn't know I was a victim.
Yeah.
And why? Because, you know, in the shower, I would boo-hoo my way out. You know, I would just let it release it all out. But when I came out, I dried my hair, I dried myself up. I powdered myself up, put on my red lipstick and, you know, put on my clothes and keep on moving. Nobody knew what I was enduring. I wasn't telling anyone what I was enduring, especially because of who my aggressor was. So, you know, it always tends to happen that the victim always wants to protect the offender.
Yeah.
Right? It's always that way. I just had a case last week where, because I knew the direction that they were going, because I did it myself. I know. You know, when I started to see the signs and then I started to really get strong with her, which then I was like, okay, I don't mean to, you know, like yell at you, but I have to be strong because you need to realize that it's a game. They're playing the game and you're falling for the game. And I need you to, regroup. Let's do this again. You know, go back in there, file the charges, do not drop the charges, and, follow the steps as I'm going with you. I'm going to be with you throughout the whole time. And, so good thing they did, and I'm with them. I'll call my people every other day. How you doing? What's going on? And that's what they need. They need to know that there is somebody there for when they're sort of like slipping, that, they're going to catch them and align them back up and say, you got this. Let's move this way. Let's go here. Let's call there. That's, whatever the circumstances, each case is a case by case. So not every case is there's some very unique cases, and others are very simple. So depending on what the severities of the issues are.
I'm going to go out on left field here. Order of protection.
Mm-hmm.
Normally people say when they don't want to call to get or even take on the order of protection because they figure the person is really going to hurt them, like the order of protection is served, and they tell them not to go within certain feet of them and whatever, but they wait until they're in a spot where it's not anywhere close to home, and then they hurt them or kill them. So I'm trying to figure out, how does the order of protection help them? Maybe that's why they don't want to take it, because they think that's going to be the end for them.
Right. So it depends. And that's why the backstory is very important to find, to ask. Like I like to ask from the beginning, like when you met, how did it go? What were, and the reason why I ask is because I want to know more about the offender. Does the offender know how to navigate the system? Does the offender even care about the system? Because if they know how to navigate it and they don't care, they have no fear for law, then I'm not going to recommend that you get an order of protection. Because what that's going to do is going to aggravate the circumstances even more. Right? So now we're going to really create a safety plan. So basically what I'm doing is I'm keeping you safe while we safety plan to what, to removing you. So that's why incrementally it's going to take longer. But again, if they follow through with everything, I'm going to navigate them through without an order of protection, and with the assistance with all the collaborating factors, right? So whatever that may be. So yeah, but you are absolutely right, Paul. It's people have mixed feelings with order protections. I have mixed feelings with order protections, but again, I need to know the history of the offender, because many of times, and many of times the order protection harms the person even more.
Yeah.
Because when you serve them, there's information that now you've given to the offender.
Right.
Where then I'm like, no, they're not entitled to that. So we're not going that route. We're going another route.
Can relationships survive up to years of physical, mental, or verbal abuse? And what is the actual end game? I'm thinking of, in the past, like when I grew up, there was this one particular friend of my mom who every Friday night, her husband would come in drunk and he would beat her up. I mean, she, and I mean, she was light skinned. So you see all the bruise and the black eyes, and she would send her kid to call my mom, and my mom would go there and talk to him. And he's like, I'm not going to do it again. And every Friday evening, like clockwork. So I figured there was no end game, but she was still there because of the kids and stuff. So I'm like trying to figure out, I know that you're helping them, and then you say about how they try to get away, and you have that bag waiting for them there. But back in those days, there was actually nowhere to go or nothing to help them with. So this is why I'm saying, can they survive? Can they still stay in that, or they have to leave? You know what I mean? If they can still stay in the relationship.
Well, and I'm glad that you stated that, because I had an aunt, same thing. And I remember as a young child saying, like, get out, leave, like, grandma is saying you can go over there. He's not going to do it over there. Like, I remember saying these things. But we got to look at laws. There were no laws back then against domestic violence.
Yeah.
On top of that, many of individuals would say, the phrase, you make your bed, now
you got to lie in it.
Right. And then the other thing is, whatever happens behind closed doors, it stays there.
It's there.
You don't tell anyone about it. People may hear it, they see it, but no one wants to say anything and get involved. And that's still true to this very day.
Mhm.
Many of times people do not want to be involved. I hear it all the time. Well, I did tell her to leave, but she just keeps going back. Or, you know what? I saw how she treated him, and I guess he must like it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, nobody ever likes to get punched, kicked, smacked, kicked, pushed, or whatever. Nobody ever likes that. So that's not a convincing term for me, that they like it. Again, there's something there that's keeping them. And that's what I want to hone in on. What's keeping you there? How can I provide it so that you don't have to receive that there? You can get it elsewhere, right? But most definitely, back then there were no laws, so it was kind of difficult. And the time, and again, and then I think of how my grandparents were, and even my aunt and uncles back then. It's they took their vows very serious.
Mm-hmm.
The whole "till death do you part" was a really big one.
Yeah.
The whole till death, till sickness and health. That was their vows. So they sustained whatever came because it was part of it.
Yeah.
They vowed to it, and they were they're very, I can say this, I still have an aunt, who my uncle's no longer, but she's still living. And I can see how she will react to even watching TV and people saying something. Like I see her cringe, or I see her, like, she'll get up and walk away because she can't hear it. So it still affects her, just hearing it from TV or outside or whatever. But most definitely, it's the person, how they are, who they are, how they took whatever it is, their relationship, how serious they took it.
Yeah.
Right. I'll mention one more example. I had an older lady who, when we were trying to explain to her how we were going to remove her husband, and all she kept saying is, if I'm not in his life, he's going to die. He's going to die if I'm not in his life. And, Paulette knows me. I'm like, okay, well,
Right.
why should you worry about that? But I had to go back to how my grandparents and how my uncles and aunts back then thought, so that I could understand what she meant. Now, with my grandmother did everything for my grandfather. Everything. Fed him, had the bath ready for him. I mean, everything. And when this lady started to say, he doesn't eat food from the outside. I cook every day. He doesn't eat leftovers. So I got to cook something new every day. His bath has to be clean before he goes in there.
Mm.
His coffee has to be made a certain way. His clothes have to be ironed a specific way. So I'm like, okay. So I started to think of my grandfather. And I remember always my mother saying, I hope that your grandmother doesn't leave before he does, because he couldn't do anything for himself. And unfortunately, she passed before he did, where then my mother and her siblings had to take turns in taking care of him, because he didn't know how to boil an egg, much less know where the pot was to do it.
Oh, wow.
He didn't know how to take his own medication because my grandmother gave him, like I said, everything. So that was how I was able to understand what this lady was saying about, if I'm not in his life, he's going to die. Yeah. And, my grandfather was malnourished because he wasn't eating. He didn't know how to cook. And he, and a lot of times he didn't have money to go, and buy something to eat. Sometimes people would bring him food, but he's not eating leftovers. So if he ate something today, that's going to stay there in the fridge for forevermore if nobody else does, throws it out. So I understood what she meant by that. And so then that's when we had to then work with what we had, with that knowledge now.
I find that some women spoil these men and make it hard if that relationship doesn't work for the other person because they've been so spoiled. And I find that with a lot of Caribbean women, they spoil their men.
Right.
Usually it's not reciprocated,
No.
but
No.
it's like that's the way these women were brought up to just cater to men.
Right. Right.
I'll tell you one thing though, Sharon, is that the men who came to this country, most of them had to learn to cook.
Yes.
Otherwise they would die from starvation. This place had changed. They had to learn to cook and to wash and stuff. You see them in the laundromat, you see them buying the grocery, because they had to do it. No one was there to do it for them.
Mhm.
You know, I always said I would never marry a Jamaican man that was brought up in Jamaica, fully grown man, because their mentality is totally different because they didn't do anything for themselves. Everyone, either their parents or the maid did everything for them. And you're so right that when they came here,
they had
to learn to do those things for themselves.
Mhm.
I remember my dad was sitting at the kitchen table and the refrigerator was like arm's length. My mom is on the other side and he's calling her to have her get the ice out of the refrigerator to put in his drink. And at that point, I don't know how I didn't get a whooping or something. I'm like, Dad, you're right there. Why are you calling her? You know, I was just so mad. So from a little child, I've been like, no, this is not the way it's supposed to be.
What I'll ask is that, you know, you got to consider the cultural norms.
Yes,
I was just going to say that.
Cultural.
You have to time that these people were brought up in. So my grandmother, who died at 99 years old, got married when she was 14.
Yes.
My grandmother had 12 children. She has never worked for a paycheck a day in her life. So just frame these are the women who are raising the daughters that are saying, you know, my mother now who is, you know, 70 years old, going, okay, this is how I need to maintain, or this is how I contribute to my home, to make sure that my man's fed, to make sure that his clothes is clean, so that when he leaves and goes to work, I ain't got to worry about this roof.
If he gets there, if he gets to work.
About the roof. But what you find is that when you switch the culture, when you move to somewhere else where the culture is, no, the money I work alone is not going to take care of the home. Yeah, so then, yeah, my spouse can't cater to me like that because my spouse got to go work too.
Yes.
Right? And so that's what they're meeting when they come somewhere else. But the reason why the women would cater to the men like they did is, one, because that's how their mothers and grandmothers did that, partly because it was the social construct of how things were done at that point in time. And it didn't mean that there were less women. It didn't mean that they were taking smack, because I tell you, my grandmother didn't do it. Okay? But
let me tell you something. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I had this guy working for me when I had a restaurant in New Jersey. Okay. And I went to Jamaica. That's when I used to go to Jamaica.
Yeah.
And I stayed with his wife. No, actually, when I met them, it was he and his wife in Jamaica. And she had to do, and I'm not talking way back when, okay? She had to do everything for him, okay? When he comes home, she has to dish out his dinner, give it to him. If he doesn't get the biggest of everything, he complains. I remember one time she had to go to a funeral. And when he came home, his food wasn't there because she went to a funeral. My food comes first. He started arguing with her when he came back. That woman did everything for him. When he came to the States, he was working for me in the restaurant. Okay? He met an American girl. Guess what? He did everything for her. Okay? She didn't do anything for him. So it's the mentality of some of these Caribbean men that the woman is supposed to. I try to teach my grandchildren, listen, there's no set things for a woman to do and a man to do. A woman can do what a man can do and vice versa. So, you know, it's just a mentality and what they're used to. The culture, as you said, in Jamaica, for example, that is the way they're brought up. And they expect that from any woman that they meet.
Right.
Yeah. So I totally agree. And because we're all Caribbean, it's the same, right? Because I remember when I got married, my grandmother was like, come here, darling, let me show you how we're going to do this. And, you know, she's telling me how I'm supposed to separate the rice from the beans and the meat on the other side and the juice on one side and water and the coffee is brewing. And I'm like, I'm not doing all that. I'm like, you know, it's not happening. But then again, I also remember my mom and how she reared us. And now it's, you know, it's I have an older sister, my brother, and myself. Now, we learned to do everything. And when I say we, I'm saying my brother included.
Yeah.
And I remember her telling us that the reason why she taught my brother how to cook, how to clean, how to iron, how to, you know, do all these things, because she saw how her father, my granddad, is, where again, he didn't know how to do a thing. You know, but
and this way they're not dependent on a woman.
Because my mother's thing is, which it's funny because I repeated it to my boys, is, you know, if you ever have to live alone because you can't depend on these little girls here now, you have to do things on your own. You have to be able to feed yourself. And it's not living off of canned foods all the time. You know, I remember her clearly saying that all the time to us, you know, especially to my brother. You know, with us, we didn't have a choice, right? Women, we needed to learn how to do all of things. But I remember her really letting my brother know. And I remember my sister-in-law, she was shocked because she has siblings, you know, brothers. And they, you know, they knew little things. My brother like knew how to do, you know, like the whole big, you know, like dumplings and stuff, you know, how to put the flour together and how much mixture of it, you know, like the whole thing. So
I met this guy once and he always have to have a woman. As he break up with one, he has to have another woman because he can't do anything for himself.
by himself, okay.
Nothing. And he was in his 20s at the time and he couldn't do anything. So he always has to have a woman.
Do you think that maybe doing all of this for them and then stop doing it can also lead to that domestic violence? It could start from there too, because then you're doing all of this, then you stop, then they get mad.
Right. Or now you're cheating.
Yeah,
you do it to somebody else.
Yeah, you're seeing someone
or somebody else has your attention. Why?
Yes.
Right. Exactly.
I'm not going to go to my question because we're running out of time.
Okay.
Sorry, Chris.
Sorry.
That's okay.
But,
this was great.
This was quite an interesting conversation. And it's so relevant because this is what a lot of individual, male or females, are going through today. You know, and as Chris said, this is not just a female issue. It's a male issue also, but it's more that it's not believable when it's a man or they don't talk about it, period. So this was a very relevant conversation. And I thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show. And we have to have you back because
awesome.
This is a continuing issue.
Yes. Thank you so much.
So thank you. Physical abuse in a relationship is real. And it is far more common than what many believe. It is also devastating and life-altering. And most importantly, it happens in silence. It often remains invisible to the outside world, sometimes until it's too late to fix anything. Whether you or someone you know and care about suffers from physical abuse in a relationship, it can be hard to see the signs, because sometimes women and men hide what is happening to them. So we need to learn to recognize the signs and know what is considered physical abuse. You'll be surprised. We'll be right back.
Estella's Legacy book series, first edition. Grandma Estella, I have a question.
Welcome back. Hope you enjoyed the show and you're able to take away some very valuable information. Our next episode will be on Sunday, June 12th, celebrating Caribbean Heritage Month with our special guest, Blacker Ellis, where it will be all about the culture.
As usual, guys, we want you to contact us at dejavutheater.fl@gmail.com. And I know it's somewhere on the, oh, there it is. There, right there. As usual, folks, if you like what we're doing here, you want to be a part of the conversation, please send us an email at dejavutheater.fl@gmail.com. See, it's right there. And of course, we need you to like our content, share, and always subscribe. Tell a friend, let them know what you're watching. And, you know, as usual, it's your likes, your commentary that keeps us going, keeps us motivated to keep doing what we're doing. So see you next time.
And I would just like to thank Enid Ocasio for being a guest on the show today. As usual, we learned a lot. We're always learning on this show. So until next time, thank you for watching. Cheers.
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 Where's your glass, Chris?
This glass is big enough to hold my face.
You see how big Paulette's glass is?
She's
Big
drinking
enough
for
to hold
both.
my face.
She's drinking for both of us.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for
she
three people.
certainly is.
For three.
I did find my glass. Thank you so much.
Oh,
Oh
you
my
found
God.
your glass. Cheers.
What's in it? What's in the glass?
Huh?
What's in the glass?
Spirit.
Yeah, what kind of spirit?
Listen, if I tell you, well, I can't but I tell you.
But why even mention it?
I mean, but no, you ask is what in the glass?
Yeah, but you're not saying anything. What's the
It's
problem?
spirit. It's spirit.
That's all right.
Did
Some
you
As
eat
long as
today?
you say, wait. You say it's a spirit as long as you don't disappear.
Okay, good.
That kind of spirit we're thinking about. Cross over the bridge.
Hold on.
Tune in to Bashment.